Hi everyone. In today's video, I'm going to demonstrate about cache scope in MuleSoft. So what is cache scope and why we need to use this and what is its advantages if we use cache scope? So it is used for storing and reusing frequently called data. You can use the scope to reduce processing load on the Mule instance and to increase the speed of message processing within a flow. And this cache scope has been used for two main reasons. One, processing repeated requests for the same information. Processing requests for information that involve large repeatable strings. So for example, in your flow, you want to retrieve employee information based on employee ID from a DB, right? So let's say the employee information present in DB will not change frequently. So, and let's say if your flow needs to, call this when your business needs to call this flow multiple times during a day, right? So what happens in real time? Every time for the data that will not going to change in DB, you are going to make a call to backend, and every time you are going to retrieve from the backend, right? So that becomes a costly operation. So every time you have to make a call to backend system and try to pull the data from it. Let's say the backend system has some SSL policy, right? Where it will only allow a particular amount of requests to pass through for a particular amount of time, right? So in this case, if you are going to call multiple times and it exceeds that a limit, you are going to pay extra amount, right? So to avoid that, you can use cache scope. So what cache scope will do is, let's say you are using HTTP requester or a DB connector, and you are going to use that inside a cache scope, right? For first time, when your flow gets called, it will go to backend and pick the employee information based on employee ID and send the response back to frontend. For the second time, if you are getting a same request, right, it won't go and call the backend. So the response that was retrieved from the first call, it will be automatically stored into cache scope. So how cache scope is going to store those value is based on key value pair, right? And due to which, for the second, if, if your flow is going to get same request for the second time, the response is going to be fetched from cache scope and going to be sent back to frontend, right? So this way, your processing time is also decreased and processing load on the instance are also decreased, right? Now let us look these scenarios with a flow. I'm going to Studio. I have a flow here where I'm just simulating the backend response since I don't have any third-party connectivity like DB at the moment. So if you could see, I have a transfer message. So first, I have a listener here and a default HTTP listener configuration, and the path is cache. And I have a logger here stating it's once the flow enters this, it will mention starting cache flow. Then I have a transfer message where I'm just simulating the backend. Okay, so that's why I have kept it as 5,000 as wait time, right? So this is without cache scope. I'm going to show you a difference. Okay, this is without cache scope. Let's see how this will work without cache scope. It's my application is already running. Okay, I'm going to hit from Postman. I'm going to Postman, employee ID. I'm going to pass it to 12. I'm going to send a request. Okay, if you notice, it takes 5 seconds to retrieve the data okay, without cache scope. And I'm going to trigger for the second time also. Yeah, if you notice, it's the same amount of time that my flow took to retrieve the data, right? So what if I have cache scope embedded, right? So for that, I'm going to add a module. I'm sorry. I'm going to drag and drop a cache scope from core components. And I'm going to drag and drop these two components into the cache scope just to demonstrate you how this flow will work if it is within the cache scope, right? So by default, it uses an object store. So I'll put up a video on object store in my further demonstrations. But for now, I'm going to create one reference, okay, caching strategy, right? And here, if you see a key, by default, it will create one sh4 key. But now, as I told you, cache scope will store the value based on key value pairs, right? So whatever I'm going to give in the key expression field will become a key, right? And the response is going to be stored against this key, right? So for now, since I'm sending employee ID from header, right? I'm going to use the same as ID. Okay, I'm going to save it. Okay, and let's see if if it is redeploying. Otherwise, we may need to redeploy. Okay, it's deployed on its own, and we'll hit from Postman for the same employee ID. This is my first call after dragging and drop this cache flow. If you notice, it took 5 seconds, right? And you can see starting cache flow, right? This logger gets printed. What I'm going to do, I'm going to clear the console. I'm going to hit for the second time for the same employee ID, right? If you notice, my response time is drastically improved. You see, 12 milliseconds, 13 milliseconds, 5 milliseconds, right? So this is the advantage of using cache flow, right? And one more thing I want to highlight is that this cache scope can only be used for repeatable streams. If it is going to be non-repeatable streams, then this cache scope will not work. I'm going to show you. I'm going to change into non-repeatable stream and I'm going to save this. Let it get redeploy. Okay, so it got redeployed. I'm going to pass a message. I'm send a transaction from Postman. And if you notice, I have the logger printed here, starting cache flow. And I got the response in 5 seconds. And I'm going to clear the console just to show you how this works. Going to Postman, trigger a transaction. Right. So if you see here, again, I got my response in 5 seconds. If I'm going to go and log into the console, it is a cache miss, right? It went into the cache scope and my logger got printed, right? So that's why I'm seeing starting cache flow, right? So please keep in mind that this cache flow will only work for repeatable streams, right? If it is non-repeatable, this cache flow does not support for non-repeatable streams. Okay. Yeah. And one more thing is, in this caching strategy, you can now it by default it will use object store. You can also set up one explicitly, right? How we can do is Go to global elements. Before going to global elements, drag and drop object store module into your palette and go to global elements. Click on create an object store configuration, and this is how the maximum entry you can handle it, and the time to live property and expiration interval. I can put 10 minutes or so. And after clicking, I can go to caching strategy. And from here, object store reference, I can pick one, pick that object store. Okay. So you can create your own object store, and you can set time to live property and expiration interval accordingly to your requirement. Okay. Right. If you like this video, please subscribe. Until next time, thank you.